on your wrist, a plain Jane.
The following video is broadcasting live, and thank you for being my studio audience. Thank you for hitting thumbs up and subscribing to my channel for more black news, celebrity entertainment, and a splash of controversy.
What up and welcome back. It's your girl Jane, the plainest Jane, and we got some syrup to get into. Come on and hit thumbs up. Listen, I am here to deliver the P-Hive some really bad news, okay? Because y'all know things are always sticky in Hollywood and in real life. And today we are going to go over this motion where it is proposed by the government that R. Kelly serves 25 plus, right? 25 or more years for his crimes. This means that R. Kelly could potentially be in his 70s when he gets out. Now, keep in mind, this is just a sentencing from one trial. R. Kelly still has 2 more trials to go. So this is a big deal, okay? If he's not going to get 25 years for the one trial, it definitely seems as though it's a solid prediction that he might at least get 25 combined from all 3. But more than likely, it's going to be more than that. These RICO charges ain't no joke. Now, what we know so far is that R. Kelly was indeed found guilty last September. Y'all remember I covered that trial and I did it very well. He was found guilty last September of sexually abusing women, boys and girls for decades, and he was convicted of all 9 counts against him in the sex trafficking trial. And this is where they explain basically how he used his money, his fame, his notoriety to abuse and manipulate people and conceal his crimes. A lot of you all remember my coverage on the R. Kelly trial, which got me mentioned by the New York Times. So shout out to the New York Times for noticing, oh, you know, your girl from Baltimore, the plainest Jane, okay? Come on and hit thumbs up. Let's just give a brief summary, and then we're going to go through this entire motion together from beginning to end. It is 31 pages, all of the most poignant and potent parts. That is what we're really going to be focusing on today. So thank you for hitting thumbs up. So just to give you a synopsis, right? If you don't recall how disgusting this trial was in discovery, and with all of the nearly 50 people who came forward to testify against R. Kelly, I'm reading you a snippet from the motion really quickly. The defendant, R. Kelly, required the women and girls to abide by all of his rules, and they punished anyone who violated the rules. He once sent a message to a person who went by the pseudonym Jane, okay? Now, that ain't me. But they went by this pseudonym, and he said, and I quote, R. Kelly says, "I knew you were young, but that's no excuse to disobey me or not do what I tell you to do." End quote. So significantly, the defendant R. Kelly also required women and girls to report any perceived violations by others. So this was a situation where R. Kelly had the girls under his thumb, right? And if any of the girls or women were breaking the rules, then there was this system among them where they needed to snitch on someone in order to get in his good graces. So there was even incentives for some of the people who were under his thumb to tell on some of the other women in the camp or people, right? Because remember, there are some John Does here as well, where he was getting down and doing some inappropriate things with them as well. But we'll keep going, right? It says the consequences for disobeying the defendant R. Kelly included violent spankings, other physical assaults, physical restraint, and threats. R. Kelly imposed these spankings on a regular basis. Now, Jane, again, this is a pseudonym, right, recalled their occurring multiple times a week for a period of years, and the spankings were painful, as made clear by one such incident that was video recorded by R. Kelly and played for the court and the jury. So that is just a brief snippet, just to refresh your memory, right? Because this is something where a motion was passed in order to suggest a hefty sentencing on R. Kelly. They are literally in an attempt to protect the public because they don't feel like if he's released that he's going to stop this behavior. They're saying he was very callous. He had a complete disregard for the victims. He showed no remorse. And they think he's going to continue this behavior if he is set free. So they are really digging into R. Kelly's butt in court, okay? If you recall, there were also very vivid sightings of R. Kelly, right, forcing the girls to eat their own feces. There was a victim from Baltimore. A lot of y'all know who she is already, right? she came out and she testified that she was forced to eat her own feces. R. Kelly did this and made her film it. And this is a form of blackmail and a control tactic that he inflicted upon them, right? As well as audio that was played during the trial of R. Kelly, punishing one of his victims by berating them and forcing them to get down on their knees while he urinated on him. So this was a really lewd, disgusting, very appalling trial to take place, number one, to cover. Number two, and when I tell you about this recording where he's literally urinating on this girl, this is something that was literally played in the court. You could hear the splashing sounds, and you could hear R. Kelly literally saying, "I'm pissing on you because you've been a bad girl." This is something that was all in the transcripts, and you all saw those excerpts when I covered that trial as well. So it was definitely a roller coaster. It was naturally salacious. There was no additional sauce that you needed to add into it to make, the allegations and what was going on in the courtroom, just more vivid, right? Because it was just already as nasty could be. So listen, I want to get right into reading this stuff for you. Let's get into the motion. Make sure y'all hit thumbs up if you on my bus, okay? Shout out to everybody in the live chat. Shout out to my channel members. I see there's a new channel member, and definitely shout out to my moderators. Let's get ready for takeoff. Drop some pancakes in the chat. Let's get started while y'all hit thumbs up, okay?
The plainest Jane. This is one of my favorite comments here. She says, I loves me some black, and she said, loves me some black news. She says, is it just me, or does anyone else get tired of seeing people that don't look like them delivering info about them day in and day out?
All right, now real quick, y'all know I tell y'all in the beginning of each and every one of my videos, checking on your mental health. Don't be getting into celebrities' business unless you done got your own invisible problems at least considered, right? Shout out to my new subscribers. And of course, before I get into breaking down today's topics and viral events, make sure you subscribe and thumbs up or down. Either way, I appreciate it. But don't forget to think critically and independently, regardless of what you hear from me or anybody else. And I just know that every single member of the Beehive, that's what we call R. Kelly fans, right? I know that each and every one of those members are going to come through and thumbs down the video. But listen, thank you for the engagement. Okay, he's a monster. So we're going to get into the full motion. But before we get into the full motion, let's just talk, right? So the New York trial, it was very high profile, and there were 45 witnesses who testified about R. Kelly's horrific behavior as it pertains to minors and sexual manipulation and deviancy, to be quite honest with you. So R. Kelly faces more criminal charges outside of New York. Minnesota state prosecutors, they are charging him with engaging in prostitution with a minor, and federal prosecutors in Illinois are charging him with child pornography and obstruction. So let's get into the motion, and then we'll get into what his attorney had to say in response. If you haven't already shared this video on Twitter, on Facebook, via text message, in your group chats where y'all cut up, make sure y'all share the video as well. This is a 31-page motion that delves into R. Kelly's callous disregard that he showed for his victims during the decades of abuse and sexual exploitation. And the prosecution feels that R. Kelly is unlikely to be deterred from further sexually abusing children or others. So the actual sentencing is scheduled for June 29th. So let's go right ahead and get into this motion. I'm going to pull it up here on the screen for you so we can see it together, where the government asks for this really hefty sentencing, right, of 25 years. So let's get into this, shall we? So we can see that this is something that was put through on June 8th. It was just 2 days ago, right? You can see they go ahead and they've got the Honorable Judge Ann Donnelly here, so on and so forth. And it says the government respectfully submits this letter in connection with the sentencing of the defendant R. Kelly, scheduled for June 29, 2022. In light of the seriousness of the offenses, the need for specific deterrence, right? And the need to protect the public from further crimes of the defendant, as well as the other factors set forth, the government respectfully submits that a sentence in excess of 25 years is warranted. So the background says the following. The evidence adduced at trial consisted of testimony from 50 witnesses, 45 witnesses called by the government, and 5 called by the defendant, who was R. Kelly, and hundreds of exhibits admitted at trial. A complete summary of the evidence, including the enterprise, its purposes, and methods supporting each of the counts of which the defendant was convicted, was included in the government's opposition to R. Kelly's motion for a judgment of acquittal. Okay. Now they're saying that this detailed factual summaries that were incorporated herein by reference, as established at trial and set forth in the pre-sentence investigation report and its addendum, with the aid of his inner circle. And over a period of decades, R. Kelly preyed upon children and young women for his own sexual gratification. In order to carry out his many crimes, R. Kelly relied upon his fame, his money, and his popularity as an R&B recording star, and used the large network of people his status afforded him, including his business managers, security guards, bouncers, runners, lawyers, accountants, assistants, all of them to carry out and conceal his crimes. He continued his crimes and avoided punishment for them for almost 30 years. And now he must be held to account. Generally speaking, the conduct underlying R. Kelly's crimes of conviction falls within the following 4 categories. 1, enticement of children. 2, the sexual exploitation of children through the production of child pornography. 3, forced labor. 4, exposure of others through unprotected sexual intercourse to an incurable disease, okay, namely herpes, without first informing his sexual partners and obtaining consent to sexual intercourse in these circumstances. So then they get into the enticement of children. Like I said, this was some very nasty stuff, okay? This is some very nasty stuff. I see a comment in the comment section that says, I know the Beehive is pissed. Listen, pun intended, okay? Because you know that the Beehive is definitely pissed. All right. So we get into talking about the enticement of children. As established at trial, R. Kelly has a long and pervasive history of enticing children to engage in sexual activity, including when they were too young to legally consent to sexual activity. His career as a recording artist and performer took him all over the United States and the world for concerts, tours, other performances, and events starting in the early 1990s. And he quickly took advantage of his access to adoring fans and musical hopefuls who jumped at the chance to meet him. He lured young girls and boys into his orbit, often through empty or conditioned promises of his assistance in developing a career in the entertainment industry, or simply by playing into the minors' understandable desire to meet and spend time with a popular celebrity. Now, we know this is something that is very true for Aaliyah. We don't know if Aaliyah was his first victim, right? But she was definitely included in the trial that took place last year. So let's see, notably believing, rightfully for a period of time, that his fame and role as a leader of the enterprise made him untouchable. R. Kelly often engaged in his criminal conduct in plain sight, doing so around and or with the assistance of others. So in the early 1990s, R. Kelly sexually abused Jane Doe number 7, who testified at trial using the pseudonym Angela, beginning when she was 14 or 15 years old. The sexual abuse began immediately after R. Kelly met Angela for the first time at his small 2-bedroom apartment, along with at least 2 other girls who were also in high school and with whom R. Kelly also engaged in illegal sexual activity. R. Kelly sexually abused Angela and the other girls in his bedroom, while members of his inner circle were in the living area directly outside. As would become a pattern, R. Kelly made clear to Angela and the other girls, who the defendant later formed into a girl group. And in the case of Angela, employed as a background dancer for his tours, that sexual activity with him was the price of admission to be around him and get access to any opportunities he could provide them within the music industry. As Angela testified, R. Kelly made clear to her and the other girls in no uncertain times that they had to quote unquote pay their dues and engage in sexual activity with R. Kelly at his direction and at times for violating the. In 1992 or 1993, R. Kelly met Aaliyah Halton, an aspiring singer who subsequently became his musical protege, and began to sexually abuse her when she was just 12 or 13 years old. R. Kelly used his access to a young Aaliyah, claiming to need extra time alone with her for rehearsal and bringing her on tours to show her the ropes, to carry out this abuse of her. One time, even shamelessly sexually abusing her by giving her oral sex in the back of his tour bus while others were in the vicinity. Faced with the possibility that his abuse of Aaliyah would be made public after she believed that she was pregnant at just 15 years old. In August of 1994, R. Kelly gathered members of his enterprise to help him carry out the bribery of a government official so that he could fraudulently marry Aaliyah in an attempt to conceal the abuse and avoid punishment. Not only did R. Kelly abuse Aaliyah, who because of her untimely death in 2001 in an airplane crash, she couldn't testify at the trial, but he made her party to his criminal cover-up scheme, okay? Having her fraudulently sign a marriage application using the illegally obtained identification to falsely claim that she was 18 years old. Now, in September of 1994, just days after secretly marrying 15-year-old Aaliyah, the defendant sexually assaulted a 17-year-old girl identified in the PSR as Jane Doe number 8, and who testified at trial under the pseudonym Addie. After two of R. Kelly's associates approached her and brought her and a friend backstage to get R. Kelly's autograph after a performance. Now, because Addie was just 17 years old, she wasn't old enough to consent to sex in Florida. Addie was brought to R. Kelly's dressing room, which was filled with press and other men who she spoke briefly to, and also R. Kelly, who not only provided his autograph on her concert program, but also wrote down his hotel room number. About the fact that she was an aspiring dancer. True to form, R. Kelly mentioned the possibility of an audition, and after learning from Addie that she was just 17, he had his associate clear the room of everyone except for him, Addie, and her friend. And within minutes in that locked dressing room, R. Kelly began kissing Addie and her friend. He became aggressive. He moved Addie to one side of the room, held her wrists, pulled down her shorts, and penetrated her vagina from behind with his penis. Now, when R. Kelly was finished, shocked and scared, Addie ran from the room with her friend. In or about 1995, R. Kelly met Jane Doe number 9, who was a 17-year-old girl at a Florida mall, and thereafter commenced a sexual relationship with her. In violation of Florida law, in violation of the law, notably, Jane Doe number 9 contracted herpes during her relationship with R. Kelly and disclosed her diagnosis to R. Kelly. And at the time, Jane Doe number 9 was only sexually active with R. Kelly. In or about 1998, R. Kelly noticed Stephanie at the Rock and Roll McDonald's. Y'all know the Rock and Roll McDonald's was like R. Kelly's favorite place. Okay? He's always at that Rock and Roll McDonald's. It's crazy. So this was 1998 at the Rock and Roll McDonald's in Chicago, where he noticed Stephanie and had one of his associates approach her, pointed R. Kelly out, and gave Stephanie R. Kelly's phone number, notwithstanding that Stephanie had informed the associate that she was only 16 at that time. Stephanie discarded the phone number and did not contact R. Kelly at that time. But approximately a year later, when Stephanie was 17, she approached R. Kelly after learning that he was at a nearby Nike store to see if he was willing to listen to her friend, who was an aspiring vocalist, sing and potentially help that friend with her career. Now, R. Kelly told Stephanie that he thought we could arrange that, but he'd like to get to know Stephanie. And he also said that he likes to cuddle. And would Stephanie be okay with that? To which Stephanie responded, yes. The defendant then gave Stephanie his phone number and told Stephanie to call him, which she ultimately did. Thereafter, R. Kelly invited Stephanie to his Chicago studio, and the two ultimately engaged in sexual intercourse. Notably, R. Kelly was aware of Stephanie's age, as Stephanie told him that she was just 17 years old on either the first or second occasion when she visited his studio. They continued to have sex over the next 6 months, and the sexual contact between Stephanie and R. Kelly did not violate Illinois law. Okay, so this is something that they have here, kind of like under an asterisk, right? And so Stephanie's sexual interactions with R. Kelly were, quote, humiliating. So Stephanie described those interactions as follows. She says, he would be very specific in how he wanted me to be. He would put me in positions that he wanted me to be in. He would tell me that he wanted me. He'd tell me to get undressed. And then he would position my body in a way, and he would then say, all right, I'm going to go. And when I come back, I want you to be just like this. So I would just be completely naked with my butt in the air and just like waiting there for him to come have his way, sometimes for hours. Lord have mercy. Okay. When R. Kelly returned to the room and Stephanie wasn't in the position that he had told her to be in, R. Kelly became very disappointed and angry. He started yelling at her. And at some point after Stephanie had told, right, R. Kelly that she was 17, and while she remained 17, R. Kelly took Stephanie to his townhouse and directed her to participate in his creation of child pornography, videotaping her naked and as he engaged in sexual activity with her. On another occasion in approximately October of 1999, Stephanie traveled to see R. Kelly in Orlando, Florida. And while there, R. Kelly took Stephanie to a recording studio and used a handheld video camera to record Stephanie's face as his penis was in her mouth and she was giving him oral sex. In yet another act of humiliation, R. Kelly ejaculated on Stephanie's face and did not let her wipe it off, instead telling Stephanie she had to walk down the hall in a more public area of the studio to another bathroom to wipe her face. Whew. During the course of her time with R. Kelly, he made it clear to Stephanie that she was not permitted to speak to any other men. On one occasion, she was at a Houston restaurant in Chicago with R. Kelly and two rappers. Stephanie wasn't allowed to speak to the rappers during the meal, but heard R. Kelly tell them that he likes young girls and that people make such a big deal out of it. But really, it ain't a big deal, because even look at Jerry Lee Lewis. He's a genius and I'm a genius. And we should be allowed to do whatever we want because of what we give this world. Thus, right? Good God, good God. So he had a clear belief that he could act with impunity in committing crimes involving minors because of his self-proclaimed musical genius status, which in his mind constituted as a free pass to do as he pleased without consequence. Now, in 2005, R. Kelly spotted Alexis, she was 15 at the time, after one of his concerts, and thereafter began a years-long relationship with her. That same year, R. Kelly met a teenage boy who testified at trial using the pseudonym Lewis. He was 17 years old at the time. And this was while he was working at McDonald's, 17-year-old Lewis, right, who was a boy, right? He was working at the McDonald's, which was close to where R. Kelly played basketball at the time. Now, after first meeting Lewis, R. Kelly again used his status in the industry to induce Lewis to meet with him again. R. Kelly also groomed Lewis and his family by inviting them to a party at his home and having Lewis meet him at his home studio in Olympia Fields. When R. Kelly had Lewis alone, he asked Lewis, who had dreams of making it as a rapper, right? He used people's musical aspirations to really take advantage of them. He asked Lewis, "What are you willing to do to make it in this business?" After which R. Kelly gave Lewis, who was 17 at the time, what? Wait a minute. He had dreams of becoming a rapper. Asked Lewis what he was willing to do to make it in the business. After which R. Kelly gave Lewis oral sex and video recorded their sexual encounter. Lord. On another occasion, R. Kelly also directed a female who Lewis didn't know to give Lewis oral sex. Oh my God. Child, I forget some of this stuff. It's been so long since I covered the trial. To give Lewis oral sex while R. Kelly watched. Oh, he's nasty. Lewis testified that R. Kelly made clear to Lewis that sexual contact with him was a prerequisite if Lewis wanted R. Kelly to help him in the music business. Like others, R. Kelly's promises to help Lewis in the music industry were empty and instead were just deployed to entice a 17-year-old boy to have sexual contact with R. Kelly and others at his direction, and on certain occasions to film that conduct. Now, in 2009 and continuing for a 6-month period into 2010, R. Kelly sexually abused Jerronda Pace, who was then 16 years old, and she was a big fan of R. Kelly's music. R. Kelly invited Jerronda to his home, and once alone with her, directed Jerronda to remove her clothing and walk back and forth naked before him. R. Kelly thereafter engaged in sexual contact with Jerronda and had sexual intercourse with her at times as described further below, making sexually explicit videos of Jerronda while she was just 16 years old. That same year, R. Kelly began to have sexual intercourse with Dominique, who was just 17 years old. To meet Dominique, R. Kelly replied upon the 16-year-old Jerronda, R. Kelly relied upon Jerronda to introduce him to Dominique, who was one of Jerronda's friends. This is something else. Shout out to Christine P, who just joined the membership. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. If you haven't already taken a moment to hit thumbs up on this video, definitely make sure you do. I'm sitting here reading y'all 31 pages. You ain't got to donate to this channel by spending no money. Just hit thumbs up. You can even subscribe for a little extra razzle dazzle. And of course, cash apps are appreciated and super chats, but it is free to donate to my channel. Now let's continue. Okay, so in 2015, R. Kelly met another young girl who testified under the pseudonym Jane at the trial, who was 17 years old, after spotting her at one of his concerts and using members of his entourage to ensure that Jane received his telephone number. Shortly thereafter, R. Kelly engaged in sexual contact with Jane under the guise of an audition in his hotel room, and soon convinced Jane to travel across the country with him and ultimately to spend her senior year of high school living with him. Now, this is clearly Azriel Clary, right? Although it was a pseudonym, it's very obvious who this is. And Azriel has been very public, right, and transparent with what her experience was like. So this is not something that people don't know. And if you didn't know, now you know. And Azriel Clary is R. Kelly's victim from Baltimore, right? Now, in April of 2015, he arranged for Jane to travel from Orlando to LA to see him. Again, R. Kelly promised to help Jane with her musical aspirations, a false promise he used to entice her to remain with him. Notably, right, when Azriel Clary disclosed to R. Kelly that she was just 17, rather than end his relationship with Azriel, R. Kelly arranged for the mother of another of his girlfriend's Jews to serve on paper as Azriel's purported legal guardian, while the defendant continued to travel, live, and have sex with her. Okay? During the course of the time Azriel Clary was with R. Kelly, and as described in more detail below, he prescribed a number of rules for Azriel and his other girlfriends to follow, exercising coercive control over him. R. Kelly began enforcing the rules shortly after Azriel met with him by punishing her when she didn't follow his prescribed rules or comply with the established protocols. These punishments included spankings, which R. Kelly called chastisements, vicious physical assaults, and confinement of Azriel Clary to a room or a bus for prolonged periods of time. This is some really atrocious stuff. Really, really atrocious stuff. Let's get into the next part, which is the production of child pornography. For decades, R. Kelly also created and maintained child pornography. Several witnesses testified that R. Kelly recorded them while engaging in sexual activity with R. Kelly and others at R. Kelly's direction. Witness after witness described how R. Kelly scripted every aspect of the sexual activity, acting as the writer, producer, and director of each encounter. As described above, in 1999, the defendant, right, R. Kelly, he sexually exploited Stephanie. He summoned her to his house where he filmed her engaging in sexually explicit behavior and them having sex. Fearful that the recording might be distributed, Stephanie begged R. Kelly to return or destroy the recording, but he never did. And to this day, Stephanie fears that the recording still exists. In later years, R. Kelly also recorded Geronda and Azriel Clary also engaging in sexual explicit conduct while they were each under 18 years old. Okay? This stuff right here is crazy. Thank you so much for the $4.99 super chat, Takashi Mandela. Your screen name is a trip. Get out of here. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Says much love to the plainest Jane. As a part of R. Kelly's grooming process, right? Oh, wait, let me make sure I didn't skip anything. Okay, forced labor. Let's get into the forced labor aspect, right? It says R. Kelly methodically groomed the women and girls in his orbit, right? Meet all of his sexual needs. First, he set an extensive set of rules, and he had the women and girls call him daddy and directed them to wear sweats or baggy clothing. When he entered a room, he expected the women and girls to immediately stand and greet him with a kiss. In more recent years, including the entirety of the time Azriel spent with him, R. Kelly's coercive tactics grew even more brazen. R. Kelly did not permit the women and girls to speak with or even look at or in the direction of other men. In the elevator, they were expected to turn and face the back. While walking through the hallways, they were expected to look at the floor. In commercial establishments, they had to direct their inquiries to a female employee or leave the establishment. And you all remember, this is something that I actually, I covered in my initial coverage, right? Where they literally weren't allowed to look in the direction of other men. If they were in the elevator or anywhere else, they literally had to turn their whole back. Like R. Kelly was either that controlling, right? I think it was a combination of him being controlling and insecure. They couldn't even lay their eyes on another man. And if you did, all of the brutal punishments and beatings that are described. And this is just a couple. These 31 pages are nothing compared to what the entire trial revealed, right? The prosecution, the government had carts full, and I mean shopping carts full of evidence. I mean hundreds of exhibits against R. Kelly, really proving that he is as monstrous as, what the general consensus is and what word on the street is, to be quite frank. It wasn't just a rumor. This is what really happened. Right. And it's just really pathetic because it's like you got women all over the world throwing grown women, legal women, throwing their panties at you. And instead, you would rather violate innocent children. He's sick. He's very, very, very sick. He's a sick Negro. And hopefully he gets the help he needs in that jail cell because he's definitely sick.
This is a sick Negro.
So let's keep going. Okay. Let's see. As a part of the grooming process, R. Kelly severely isolated the women and girls. He discouraged communication with their family members and friends and prohibited the use of social media. They were also not permitted to exchange personal information with the other women who lived with R. Kelly. Now, when R. Kelly arranged for women and girls to visit him, R. Kelly required them to spend their time waiting for him in a location that he dictated. Within a few weeks of meeting R. Kelly and traveling to Las Vegas with him, Azriel tried to go to the mall, but an assistant made clear to her that she would need to first get R. Kelly's permission. And Azriel told her mom everyone was having fun, but R. Kelly told her, do not leave that room. Now, Faith testified that she spent hours on a Sprinter van waiting for R. Kelly, only leaving to go to the bathroom, and only when she had R. Kelly's permission. More generally, witnesses advised that they often accompanied R. Kelly to meetings, social gatherings, restaurants, bars, and other events, but R. Kelly often directed them to stay in the Sprinter van while he went to the meeting, gathering, or event. If they needed a bathroom, they could obtain permission from R. Kelly to leave the van, or they had to urinate in a cup. Okay? Now, when R. Kelly learned that one woman had left the bus at a pit stop during a long distance drive without first obtaining his permission, R. Kelly became enraged and insistent testified that when R. Kelly learned of this transgression, she had never seen R. Kelly so, quote, upset. Now, R. Kelly required the women and girls to regularly write letters, purportedly confessing to generally false criminal activity and other embarrassing conduct. Now, this is a form of blackmail, we all know. And it was also a way for him to make sure that if and when they showed up to court, that they were writing these letters full of lies. I give consent. I want to do all these things. All this stuff is consensual, to kind of void himself of accountability or legal ramifications, right? This is something that I covered very extensively in my trial coverage, right? And so in these letters, they falsely confessed to stealing money and jewelry. They falsely admitted to conducting elaborate robberies. One falsely claimed that she seduced R. Kelly when she was underage and threatened him, right? Threatened to claim that he raped her if he would not engage in sexual activity with her. Now, let me read that again, just so you make sure. In these letters, they falsely confessed to stealing money and jewelry. They falsely admitted to conducting elaborate robberies, and one falsely claimed that she seduced R. Kelly when she was underage and threatened to claim that he raped her if he would not engage in sexual activity with her. For safekeeping, R. Kelly kept certain of these letters in a document protector and in a locked safe. Now that is sick. Okay. That is sick. Thank you so much for the $2 super sticker, Tyra Renee. I really appreciate that. So R. Kelly also had certain women record videos in which they falsely appear genuine, right? I'm sorry, in which they falsely claim that family members had abused them. To make the allegations in these recordings appear genuine, R. Kelly directed the women to make their confession shortly after he had physically assaulted them and caused them to shed tears of pain. Now, R. Kelly also directed certain women to make videos depicting themselves engaging in humiliating behavior. At least 3 women made videos of themselves. Lord have mercy. Now, I told y'all about this in the beginning of the video, right? At least 3 women made videos of themselves eating feces and rubbing it all over their bodies. He filmed another young woman walking back and forth naked, making derogatory comments about herself, which he directed her to repeat over and over and over again after first spanking her multiple times. Oh, Atmos is in the building. Shout out to Atmos. I don't see you in the show. Oh, hey. Hey, Atmos. Thank you so much for coming through. So R. Kelly required the women and the girls to abide by all of his rules and punished anyone who violated these rules. He once sent a message to Jane that says, "I knew you were young, but that's no excuse to disobey me and not do what I tell you to do." End quote. Significantly, R. Kelly also required women and girls to report any perceived violations by others. The consequences for disobeying R. Kelly included violent spankings, other physical assaults, physical restraint, and threats. Now, he imposed these spankings on a regular basis. Jane recalled their occurring multiple times a week for a period of years. The spankings were painful, as made clear by one such incident video recorded by R. Kelly and played for the court and the jury. Now, remember, I was telling you about this a bit earlier in the video when we were doing the introduction, okay? So, for what he perceived as greater violations, R. Kelly physically assaulted the women and girls using shoes, extension cords, and other objects in his grasp. On other occasions, he required the women or girls to remain in their room or bus for prolonged periods of time. And on one occasion, he told one young woman who he perceived had disobeyed him that people are, quote unquote, murdered for doing shit like this, end quote. He then told that same woman that she needed to be on his team or else. There's a quote here that says, if you bullshit me now, then I'm going to look at you while you're not on my team at all. Then I'm going to look at you, then you're not on my team at all, end quote. So he's basically intimidating them to be a part of his camp, to not relinquish their affiliation with him and control that he has over them. Cher says he's sadistic. Yeah, he is sadistic. The physical abuse by R. Kelly, it was severe. For example, Jane testified that on one occasion, R. Kelly spanked her and 2 other women who then lived with the defendant 15 times a day after they paired off and spoke openly about their relationships with R. Kelly in violation of R. Kelly's rules. On another occasion, when Jane was just 17 years old, she was 4'11", she weighed a mere 98 pounds. R. Kelly beat Jane all over her body with his fists and with his shoe. Jane also testified that she saw the defendant physically abuse his live-in girlfriends. There's a quote here that says, I've seen him slap his other live-in girlfriends open palm. I've seen him drag them by their hair. I've seen him punch them in their face and all over their bodies. And I've also seen him hit them with objects. I've seen R. Kelly also use shoes, and also once I did see him use a cord of some sort, end quote. Sometimes as punishment, R. Kelly confined women and girls to a particular location for a prolonged period of time. Jane testified that R. Kelly sometimes directed her to stay in a room until he determined that she had sufficiently apologized. Text messages from December of 2015 to one of her close friends directly support her account. She wrote, quote, I was like, can I take a shower? Can I take a shower? And R. Kelly was like, no, you're going to stay in the room, end quote. One of his assistants saw R. Kelly's abuse, right, and commented that Jane had been, quote unquote, confined since the day before. On another occasion, an assistant saw that R. Kelly confined Jane again, this time for a 2-day period, and relied on the assistant and another woman to alternately keep watch over Jane, okay? Relying on the pattern of activity described above and much more, R. Kelly regularly required the women and girls to engage in sexual contact with him and others. And upon his command, including upon threat of physical violence, for example, R. Kelly's sexual and physical abuse of Geronda culminated when R. Kelly slapped her and choked her until she passed out. He spit on her and told her to, quote, put her head down in shame, end quote. When Geronda got up off the floor, R. Kelly instructed her to perform oral sex on him. And after Geronda complied with his instruction, he ejaculated on her face. After regularly and physically and psychologically abusing Jane and other women, he required them to have sex with other women and even men. R. Kelly directed when these encounters took place, who participated, and the particular sexual acts performed during the encounters, and often recorded them. R. Kelly regularly required Jane to have sexual contact with other men and women at his direction, including the women living with him, his assistants, Lily and Cassandra, and a man he referred to as nephew, whom she had never seen prior to R. Kelly directing her to have sex with him. Now, you remember I covered this in the trial, right? And someone says, please hit thumbs up. Yes, thank you so much. You remember I covered this on trial. Some of the men who he was forcing these underage girls to have sex with, and some of the men that R. Kelly would have sex with, he would call them nephew. I don't know why you want to have sex with somebody you would nickname nephew. Are you imagining? You know, R. Kelly was also molested too by his sister. So he had a rough start himself, but that's not an excuse to inflict that upon several other people. Get help, right? He had more than enough money and resources to get help. He just refused to, and he felt like he was above, being held accountable. One such sexual encounter was vividly depicted in government exhibits 341 through 343, which was a video of a sexual encounter between the man Jane knew as only nephew, who testified as Alex, and another of the defendant's living girlfriends. The video showed R. Kelly directing the woman to give Alex oral sex and then to have sexual intercourse with him. Specifically, R. Kelly physically positioned the woman so that She was in the precise sexual position that R. Kelly wanted and held onto the woman's hair as he forcefully and repeatedly pushed her mouth onto Alex's penis. R. Kelly maintained total control throughout the encounter, and in fact, their facial expressions show two people who appear positively numb to what was happening. They just listened to R. Kelly execute demands. You know what? It is definitely time. It is definitely time to go to the bush.
It was gone.
Let me just go in the bush and weep. Let me just go in the bush and weep. I just have to go in the bush and weep. Really. I don't understand. I swear to God, I don't understand.
Someone in the comments says, this is Dominique. Let me know who you all think all of these Jane Does are down below. I don't want to rehash it. If you are privy to my website, there is some information there. But let's conspire below, right? And in the chat, who do you think, if you can recognize based off the testimony, if you are someone who is very familiar, there are a lot of people, I mean, myself included, who know all of this R. Kelly stuff like the back of their hand because they follow it, because it's very much like a telenovela. If you know who they are, or if you're taking guesses, let me know who you think they are down below and why, okay? So let's continue. On another occasion, upset that fate had broken one of his rules, R. Kelly required her to give him oral sex after bringing her into a tiny room where a gun was present, grilling her with questions and telling her that there would be consequences if she lied. With his gun nearby, R. Kelly then placed the pillow on the floor, told Faith to get on her knees, pulled out his penis, grabbed the back of her neck, told her to suck his dick, and pushed her forward so her mouth made contact with his penis. Scared and intimidated, Faith obliged, and she described it as she was under R. Kelly's rules and he had a weapon, so she wasn't even going to step out of line. In sum, R. Kelly used coercive control, exemplified by a pattern of isolation, rules, dependence, threats, intimidation tactics, physical abuse, and on at least one occasion, the presence of a firearm to force victims, including minors, to engage in sexual activity with the defendant, right, with R. Kelly and others at his direction, and to become unwilling participants in his pornographic films that he created. Now we get into the exposure of genital herpes, because everybody know R. Kelly got herpes, and he spread it around knowingly too. Over 3 decades, it was brought to his attention on many occasions. He had been tested. He brought doctors in to get tested. He was friends with the doctor. This was a big thing that I covered in the trial as well, right? And I feel like that doctor should be held accountable for some things too, because he definitely broke code. But we get into this part of the motion, and it says R. Kelly also exposed multiple women, girls, boys, to sexual transmitted and incurable diseases such as genital herpes without their knowledge or consent, notwithstanding that he had been explicitly told by his personal doctor to inform his sexual partners of his diagnosis and to use a condom when having sex. As early as 2004, R. Kelly had been diagnosed with genital herpes and exposed a woman who testified at trial using the pseudonym Kate and another woman who was Jane Doe number 12 to herpes without their consent. Both sued him and received financial settlements in exchange for their silence. But R. Kelly nonetheless remained entirely undeterred by these financial consequences. And over the next 15 years, R. Kelly engaged in unprotected sexual intercourse with multiple partners, exposing each of them to genital herpes. As proven at trial, R. Kelly never disclosed his diagnosis to Jane or Faith, and never sought their consent to engage in unprotected sexual activity in these circumstances. As did many of R. Kelly's sexual partners before her, including Geronda. When she was just 17 years old, Jane contracted genital herpes from R. Kelly, and this is a serious medical condition that she'll have to live with, and she'll also have to disclose this to future partners and for the rest of her life. As Jane testified, she was devastated after receiving her diagnosis. She explains, quote, "I felt that this man had purposely given me something he knew he had, a situation that he could have controlled," end quote. By contrast, when Jane told R. Kelly about her diagnosis, he appeared agitated and callously told her that she could have contracted it from someone else. And when she subsequently had herpes outbreaks, R. Kelly disparaged her, telling her, quote, "I think your pussy is broken." Lord have mercy. Oh, that's just so cruel. That's just so cruel for me to read. Uh, mm.
Out of pocket for that shit. Way out of pocket. What do you gain from that?
Okay, as we continue, we get into the discussion. We talk about the guidelines of the calculation. In his sentencing memorandum, R. Kelly lodges several objections to the guidelines of calculation set forth in the PSR addendum. Additionally, the government objects to certain aspects of the guidelines calculation in the PSR addendum. Each of these objections are addressed below. For A, we have Racketeering Act 1, bribery related to Jane Doe number 1, who is Aaliyah. As to Racketeering Act 1, R. Kelly objects to the inclusion of 2-level enhancement, right, for the use of a person less than 18 years old to commit the offense of bribery. You remember he married Aaliyah when she was just 15 years old. They went down to the courthouse. Now, while the government agrees with the probation department that the defendant used Aaliyah, who was 15, to perpetrate the marriage fraud, the government cannot say that he used her to perpetrate the bribery itself, and therefore submits that the court should not apply this enhancement. Then we get to Racketeering Act 2, which is the sexual exploitation of a child who is Jane Doe number 2, who utilized the pseudonym Stephanie. Racketeering Act 2, R. Kelly objects to the level 2 enhancement, right, which applies if the offense involved the commission of a sexual act or sexual contact. Now, in R. Kelly's view, the enhancement is duplicative of the sexual contact in the base offense level. He is wrong. Sexually explicit conduct does not require the commission of a sexual act or sexual contact. Sexually explicit conduct, as defined by 18 USC, includes, among other conduct, right, lascivious exhibition of the anus, genitals, or pubic area of any person. And by contrast, a sexual act or sexual contact defined by 18 USC does not include and goes well beyond such conduct, instead covering contact between certain body parts and intentional touching of the body parts. Accordingly, the enhancement is not duplicative. Okay, so there's a lot of semantics here, but R. Kelly and his attorney, right, Bonjean, they are playing all types of word games to try to get out of all of these counts. Then you've got Racketeering Acts 3 and 4, which is the kidnapping / Mann Act violation for Jane Doe number 3, who utilized the pseudonym Sonia. Okay, so R. Kelly objects to the inclusion of the guidelines calculation of the conduct related to Sonia, as alleged in Racketeering Acts 3 and 4. The government submits that Sonia's testimony was credible and supported by other evidence, and therefore is properly included in the PSR. Now, while the government submits that this conduct has been proven, right, by a preponderance of evidence and constitutes relevant conduct pursuant, right, there's a United States versus Ruggiero. Because the adjusted offense level associated with the offense conduct, even absent conduct related to Sonia, carries a life sentence. The additional conduct related to Sonia has no bearing on the adjusted offense level, and the government respectfully submits that the court need not make a finding as to whether it should be included in the guidelines calculation. Okay. So then we go on to Racketeering Act 5, which is the Mann Act violation for Jane Doe number 4, who is Geronda, right? And this says grouping. As an initial matter, the government disagrees with the probation department's grouping of Racketeering Acts 5, 6, and 7. The United States Sentencing Guidelines provides that it counts involving substantially the same harm shall be grouped into a single group, and then sets forth 4 means through which conduct should be grouped, including when counts involve the same victim and the same act or transaction. Application Note 3 explains under subsection A that counts are to be grouped together when they represent essentially a single injury or are a part of a single criminal episode or transaction involving the same victim. When one count charges an attempt, right, to commit an offense and the other charges of the commission of that offense, or when the count charges an offense based on a general prohibition and the other charges are a violation of a specific prohibition encompassed in the general prohibition, the counts will be grouped together and under a subsection. Okay. So there's a lot of legal, basically mumbo jumbo in here, right? With regards to this. And again, R. Kelly's, legal defense, what's left of R. Kelly's legal defense, they're trying to find any loophole they can find, but the government is really combing through this, right? The prosecution is combing through this with a fine-tooth comb to make sure that he's held accountable for this stuff, okay? R. Kelly was 26 years older. Woo. 26 years older than Jane Doe number 4, who was Geronda, thereby giving rise to a rebuttable presumption of the application of the law. R. Kelly's attempt to rebut this presumption by claiming that Geronda was sophisticated and took great pains to get close to R. Kelly is absurd. Geronda was a 16-year-old girl who was a devoted fan of his music, nothing about which amounts to sophistication. I know that's right. How dare you call a 16-year-old girl who was just a super fan sophisticated? At first, y'all was calling them sluts and hoes. Now you calling them sophisticated? Make up your mind. Like, come on now. This is outrageous. This is outrageous. By contrast, R. Kelly, a famous and wealthy musician who was 26 years her senior, induced her to engage in sexual contact with him, including after he learned that she was just 16 years old. Now, moreover, R. Kelly promulgated various rules that Geronda was required to follow in an effort to control her and directed her to have sexual contact with other people too, including another woman, further evidencing the undue influence he wielded over her. And in these circumstances, R. Kelly has not rebutted, and he can't rebut them, which is the presumption. The enhancement is therefore warranted. The government's definitely not playing with him, okay? The government is not playing with him. They also have commission of sexual act enhancement. There's a lot of stuff here. Racketeering Act 6, forced labor. R. Kelly objects to the 4-level enhancement pursuant. As an initial matter, it applies, let's see, it says there, any other felony offense was committed during the commission of or in connection with the peonage or involuntary servitude offense. Application Note 2 provides that any other felony offense means any conduct that constitutes a felony offense under federal, state, or local law other than an offense that it itself covered by this subpart. As noted above, the government submits that Racketeering Act 6 should not be grouped with Racketeering Act 5 or Racketeering Act 7, and that instead each act be considered separately. So they're trying to get him a shorter sentence. Should be done separately. As a result, the government also disagrees with the probation department's assessment that the other felony offense that was committed during the commission or in connection with the forced labor offense was indeed sexual exploitation of a child. Racketeering Act 7, sexual exploitation of a child, as it pertains to Jane Doe number 4, who is Geronda Pace. Geronda testified immediately that before R. Kelly instructed her to give him oral sex, that he choked her, causing her to pass out, and therefore it caused her to engage in a sexual act by placing her in fear that she would be subjected to serious further bodily injury that involves substantial risk of unconsciousness. Okay. Let's see. For the purpose of producing sexually explicit material, the offense involved the use of a computer or an interactive computer service to persuade, induce, entice, coerce, facilitate the travel of a minor to engage in sexually explicit conduct, or to otherwise solicit participation by a minor in such conduct, or solicit participation with a minor in sexually explicit conduct. We get down to Racketeering Act 8, which is the Mann Act violation for Jane Doe number 5. The government respectfully disagrees with the determination that the applicable guideline for Racketeering Act 8, right, and instead submits that the applicable guideline is 2G 1.1, because at the time the defendant committed the conduct alleged in Racketeering 8, Jane had told the defendant that she was 18 years old and had not yet told him that she was in fact 17. The government submits that 2G 1.1 is the more applicable guideline. Okay. So there's a lot of back and forth going on here. From my understanding, R. Kelly's attorney, Bonjean, right? What is it? Jennifer Bonjean. She's playing a lot of games and really trying to delay, just delay a lot of what is going on right now. And look, if you are just getting in here, make sure that you hit thumbs up on the video if you haven't already. Jennifer Bonjean is quite the annoying attorney, but I mean, she is just doing her job, which is trying to find loopholes and trying to delay the process and get a shorter sentence. And I can't wait to tell you what her response is to this motion and to the proposed 25-year plus sentence that the government, that the prosecution is trying to place upon R. Kelly. Let's continue reading, okay? Racketeering Act 9, Jane Doe number 5. As an initial matter, the government disagrees with the probation department's grouping of racketeering acts 9 and 10. Those acts relate to the Mann Act violation related to Jane Doe number 5 and 2 of the sexual exploitation of Jane Doe number 5. The Mann Act violation centered on R. Kelly's arranging for Jane Doe number 5 to travel from New York to California for the purpose of sexual contact, despite the fact that Jane Doe number 5 was too young to consent to sex. The sexual exploitation conduct related to R. Kelly's recording of Jane Doe number 5 engaging in sexually explicit conduct over the course of a longer time period. Even though the conduct was overlapped in time, the conduct underlying each of these racketeering acts constitutes separate acts or transactions and involved in very different harm. Okay. They're saying that the 2 episodes of sexual misconduct that society has legitimately criminalized occurring with the same person on different days are not substantially the same harm for purposes of Section 3D 1.2. There's a lot of other legal mumbo jumbo. That's not Joe Biden. Joe Biden, get out of here. We were on page 13. Okay, so let's see where we left off. Let's see. Jane Doe number 5, 2 through 1.3. Let's see. As a result of herpes, page 16. Okay. Let's see. Let's get into this. This is fraud enhancement that we have here, right? This says, moreover, though not required, R. Kelly is incorrect that Jane suffered no harm as a result of her unknowing exposure to R. Kelly's genital herpes through sexual intercourse in California in April and May of 2015. As Jane testified, the trip was the first time she and R. Kelly had sexual intercourse. Because she was unaware of him having genital herpes, due to R. Kelly's failure to inform her of it, Jane continued to have unprotected sex with R. Kelly and thereafter contracted herpes from him, with which she was eventually diagnosed a few months later, which was August 14th of 2015. Now, indeed, based on the evidence presented at trial and the reasonable inferences to be drawn from it, there is no doubt that R. Kelly intended to deceive Jane and all the other women and girls he had unprotected sexual intercourse with without first disclosing his diagnosis. Years prior, he'd been explicitly informed by his personal doctor to inform his sexual partners of his diagnosis and to use a condom during sex. He had also faced civil suits for infecting prior sexual partners with genital herpes, and his preference for continued sexual intercourse without the use of a condom clearly was more important to him than risking that desired sexual partner would either decide not to have sexual intercourse with him at all or insist on the use of a condom if informed of his diagnosis. His decision not to disclose this marital fact was clearly intentional and not the result of any other accident or mistake. And that's true. Not only did his doctor literally show up and testify that, yeah, he was he got it. He got it. You know, if you've settled with several women prior to infecting other people because you have herpes, you've had to pay several settlements and you're still doing it, it's more than implied that you had it. You had it. You had it. And although these were civil lawsuits and they weren't criminal lawsuits where you had to pay these settlements, it still speaks volumes to his malicious intent to not care and to infect other minors, adults, boys, girls, women, whatever, men, whatever, right? Racketeering Act 9. Okay. And this is just a lot of grouping information. So it's really not important because they're just trying to group together a lot of stuff. We've read some of the former subsections right above where they're just, R. Kelly's attorney is trying to group things together and saying his sentence shouldn't be so large because a lot of the things that you are accusing him of are the same thing. And really the government is saying, no, they're all separate things because they want to maintain that more hefty and sturdy sentencing. Okay. So, cross-referencing, custody care, supervising, commission of sexual enhancement. Let's see. Let's read this subsection number 3 that says custody care or supervising enhancement, right? R. Kelly objects to the 2-level enhancement, right? They're saying that if the minor was otherwise in the custody care or supervisory control of R. Kelly, right? Then it says the government submits that the evidence established that Jane's parents had entrusted Jane to the supervision of the defendant, purportedly to assist Jane with her musical career. Now, this is Azriel Clary, right? After which Jane lived with R. Kelly, right? Note authorizing Juice's mother to have custody of her until she turned 18 years old. Now, Jane testified that after learning that she was 17 years old, R. Kelly told her that she would need to be homeschooled and living with him in Chicago. And so R. Kelly and Azriel Clary convinced her parents to allow her to be homeschooled and to be in Chicago so that she could learn more musically. And R. Kelly had her parents sign a document consenting to her to, quote, be in Chicago under a woman that he had known. It says here in parentheses, Jane testifying that she and her parents knew Juice's mother, the guardian chosen by R. Kelly, only through R. Kelly, right? So in other words, they didn't know her from a can of paint. They only knew, Azriel Clary's parents only knew Juice's mother through R. Kelly. It wasn't somebody that they previously knew, right? Let's see, sexual exploitation of a child. We know that. Let's see. This is the stuff he had on his devices. Let's read this. This is an important subsection right here. Use of an interactive computer service enhancement, right? R. Kelly objects to the application of a 2-level enhancement for the use of a computer or interactive computer service to induce the minor to engage in sexually explicit conduct. So it says, if for the purpose of producing sexually explicit material, the offense involved the use of a computer or an interactive computer service to persuade, induce, entice, coerce, facilitate the travel of a minor to engage in sexually explicit conduct, or to otherwise solicit participation by a minor in such conduct, or to solicit participation with the minor in sexually explicit conduct. The government submits that the enhancement is properly applied. The defendant stayed in touch, right? R. Kelly stayed in touch with Jane by cellular telephone and regularly used a cellular phone to communicate with her in order to induce her to travel to see him and to instruct her to meet with him where he intended to record sexual activity. Government Exhibit 157 shows the extensive communication via cell phone that R. Kelly had with her prior to her turning 18 years old. Oh, they used the word sadistic. There was I think it was Cher Says in the chat. She said he's a sadistic mother. They're actually using the word sadistic in this government documentation. Okay. So here it says sadistic conduct enhancement. R. Kelly objects to the application of 4-level enhancement, right? It says that there's a certain section that provides that the enhancement applies when the offense involved material that portrays sadistic or, masochistic, right? Masochistic conduct or other depictions of violence. The government agrees that there was no evidence that the defendant produced visual depictions of Jane that included sadistic conduct or other depictions of evidence while she was under 18 years old, and therefore submits that this enhancement is not warranted. The government further disagrees. They further disagree with this addendum that according to the principles of relevant conduct, that R. Kelly's use of sadistic punishment to Jane warrants this enhancement. As described above, the government submits that the conduct that forms the basis for the forced labor predicate, which the government agrees does involve sadistic conduct on the part of R. Kelly, should be treated as a separate offense from this predicate, and therefore a 4-level enhancement should apply here. Okay. Here we have another subsection that says custody, care, or supervising enhancement. Okay. This is something they already went over, and this is exactly why it says for reasons described in more detail above, because we just read through that, right? Whereas Riel Clary Juice's mom, and they literally say, we don't know this woman from a can of paint. We only know her through R. Kelly, right? So they already went through that. Racketeering Act 11, forced labor. This really isn't anything that we haven't went over already. Mann Act violations as it pertains to faith. Let's see. As to Racketeering Acts 12 and 14, R. Kelly objects to the 4-level enhancement. The 4-level enhancement is warranted, and it applies to the offense involved of fraud or coercion. At issue is only whether the offense involved is fraud or coercion. Here, a preponderance of the evidence supports that the evidence did involve fraud and that the defendant knowingly, right, R. Kelly knowingly made a misstatement or omission of material fact to entice the victim. A material fact is one that a reasonable person would expect to rely on when making a decision. Specifically, R. Kelly induced Faith to travel to New York and engage in sexual intercourse, but intentionally concealed from her that he had contracted herpes, and as a result, the offense did involve fraud, and the court should apply the enhancement. All right, forced labor with Faith, not important. We've already went over a lot of this stuff. Aggravating role enhancement, right? 3B 1.1. They're saying finally, but they ain't wrapping up. Okay, but this does seem like it's an important subsection. Okay, if you listen, this is a lot of reading to do. We are, I wouldn't say we're almost done, but we are trucking our way through. We are 2/3 through this video. This is an important subsection. Listen, pay your fare on my bus. Hit the daggone thumbs up button. I'm spending my Friday night reading y'all books, okay? Now, I'm going to do another live after this where we're just going to sit back, relax, get on the Black News bus, do a social media stroll, and talk about some of these trending topics, what's going on in social media, Black news, all that other stuff. But for now, I wanted to get this out of the way and get you all this information. So please do me a favor, hit that thumbs up button. Cash apps and super chats are welcome as well. And of course, if you have not already hit that subscribe button, I don't know what you're waiting for, but I can kick you off my bus in a heartbeat if you don't hit that subscribe button. Okay. All right. Let's get back into this. Okay. Now, aggravating role enhancement. Finally, the government submits that notwithstanding R. Kelly's objection, a 4-level role enhancement is warranted. Section 3B 1.1 provides for a 4-level enhancement where R. Kelly was an organizer or leader of a criminal activity that involved 5 or more participants or was otherwise extensive. The application notes explain that while a participant is a person who is criminally responsible for the commission of the offense, and in assessing whether an organization is otherwise extensive all persons involved during the course of the entire offense are to be considered. Thus, a fraud that involved only 3 participants but used the unknowing services of many outsiders could be considered extensive. Application Note 4 makes clear that in distinguishing a leadership and organizational role from one of mere management or supervision, titles such as kingpin or boss are not controlling. Factors the court should consider include the exercise of decision-making authority, right? Decision-making authority, the nature of participation in the commission of the offense, the recruitment of accomplices, the claimed right to a larger share of the fruits of the crime, the degree of participation in planning or organizing the offense, the nature and scope of the illegal activity, and the degree of control and authority exercised over others. There can, of course, be more than one person who qualifies as a leader or organizer of a criminal association or conspiracy. The adjustment does not apply to a defendant who merely suggests committing the offense. Furthermore, right, the Second Circuit explains that in a RICO offense, a defendant's role's adjustment is to be made on the basis of the defendant's role in the overall RICO enterprise. Viewed through that lens, it's clear that R. Kelly was the leader of the enterprise and that the 4-level enhancement is warranted. In opposing the role enhancement, R. Kelly's argument is twofold. First, he challenges the existence of the enterprise, but the jury clearly and necessarily rejected that contention, right? When it found him guilty of racketeering. Now, second, R. Kelly suggests that a role in enhancement is only warranted if the activity overseen by R. Kelly involved 5 or more individuals also engaged in criminal activity. Even assuming so that there were not 5 participants involved in the criminal activity, as that term is defined, the government submits that the criminal activity overseen by R. Kelly was otherwise extensive. R. Kelly oversaw dozens of his employees and associates, his inner circle, who knowingly or not were critical to his ability to carry out these criminal offenses that he committed. In determining the number of participants, a district court considers 1, the number of knowing participants in the criminal activity, or 2, the number of unknowing participants whose activities were organized or led by the defendant with specific criminal intent. 3, the extent to which the services of the unknowing participants were peculiar and necessary to the criminal scheme. Thus, this enhancement is warranted. Woo, the government is not playing here. You hear me? The government submits that the applicable guidelines calculation is as follows. Racketeering Act 1, bribery, base offense level, adjusted offense level. They're saying that there's Racketeering Act 2, sexual exploitation of a minor. Racketeering Act 5, which is a Mann Act violation. Racketeering Act 6, forced labor. Racketeering Act 7, sexual exploitation of a child. Then they have Racketeering Act 8, which is the Mann Act violation. Racketeering Act 9, which is the Mann Act violation again. They have Racketeering Act 10, sexual exploitation of a child. Now, mind you, you hear the same things listed over and over again, but there are different Jane Does listed each time. And that's why they're separate things and separate counts. Okay. Let's see, we get to the next page. It says Racketeering Act 11, forced labor upon Jane Doe number 5. Racketeering Act 12, which is a Mann Act violation against Jane Doe number 6, who was Faith. Racketeering Act 13 is forced labor. Racketeering Act 14 is the Mann Act violation. Let's see. And that appears to be the last one here. Okay. Let's see what else they have. Ooh, this is when they get to talking about the sentence. A sentence in excess of 25 years is warranted. This is the juicy part that I'm ready to get into. Thank you so much, Lovely Star Beating, for the $1.49 super sticker. I appreciate it. And shout out to you for also joining the membership. Thank you so much. Okay, so we get to this Roman numeral number 2, where it says a sentence in excess of 25 years is warranted. It says the government respectfully submits that a sentence in excess of 25 years is appropriate in light of all of the relevant factors, including the nature of circumstances of the offense, the history and characteristics of R. Kelly, and the need for the sentence to reflect the seriousness of the offense, to promote respect for the law, to provide just punishment, and to afford adequate deterrence, and to protect the public. Oh, they bust out all their words for that one. They bust out all of the words for that one, okay? They said to reflect the seriousness of the offense, to promote respect for the law, to provide just punishment, and to provide to afford adequate deterrence, and to protect the public, okay? We get into the legal standard. Let's see. The sentencing guidelines are advisory, not mandatory. The Supreme Court, however, the Supreme Court held in Booker that the sentencing court must consider the guidelines in formulating an appropriate sentence. Whew. Based on the factors set forth, a sentence in excess of 25 years is appropriate for this case. We get into the nature and the circumstances of this right here, okay? It says, relying on his inner circle and his fame and wealth as a successful R&B singer, R. Kelly engaged in conscious, repeated patterns of enticement of minors, sexual exploitation, and sexual abuse, among other crimes that spanned a period of decades. Through his actions, the defendant exhibited a callous disregard for the very real effects that his crimes had on his victims, and has shown no remorse for any of his conduct. Indeed, R. Kelly's decades of crime appear to have been fueled by narcissism and a belief that his musical talent absolved him of any need to conform his conduct, no matter how predatory, harmful, humiliating, or abusive to others, to the structures of the law. The nature and circumstances of R. Kelly's crimes are exponentially serious. Racketeering is a crime that penalizes individuals like R. Kelly who commit a pattern of certain crimes backed by a network of others. It's a serious crime that warrants a significant punishment, as are the crimes of bribery, enticement of minors, sexual exploitation, and sexual abuse. In many ways, however, R. Kelly's conduct was more than nefarious than the typical cases involving such crimes, because he committed these crimes using his fame and stardom as both a shield which prevented him close scrutiny or condemnation of his actions, and a sword which gave him access to wealth and a network of enablers to facilitate his crimes, and an adoring fan base from which to call his victims. Put simply, R. Kelly's crimes were calculated, they were methodical, and a part of a long-standing pattern of using his platform as a larger-than-life musical persona and his deep network to gain access to teenagers, many of whom who were particularly vulnerable, and then to exploit them for his personal gain and sexual gratification. Aaliyah was only 12 at the time that R. Kelly began sexually abusing her, and 15 when he secretly and fraudulently married her in an effort to protect himself from the consequences of that abuse. The woman who went by the pseudonym of Stephanie, she was 17 years old when he sexually exploited her, testified that she was previously sexually abused and that she was really scared when R. Kelly told her that he was going to make a sexually explicit video of her. She said that this was the hardest time of my life. I had very low self-esteem, and I'd already been through sexual trauma and abuse within my family, my first boss, and by men on the street. It was the hardest time of my life, and I was very vulnerable. R. Kelly's exploitation of Stephanie was exacerbated. When he refused to return or destroy the video recordings he made of her, despite her pleas for him to do so. Now, under the pseudonym of Sonia, she was an aspiring radio disc jockey in her 20s. Oh, child, that was Kitty. I remember her. She recounted in vivid detail how she awoke in his studio to find her underwear removed, and that R. Kelly was then fixing his pants. evidencing that he had sexually assaulted her while she was asleep. Geronda was 16 years old when he abused her. She broke down in tears when she read from a journal entry about the last time that he abused her. She read, "I went to R. Kelly's house and Rob called me silly. He called me a silly bitch. He slapped me 3 times. He said if I lie to him again, he's not going to be it's not going to be an open hand next time." Okay, so he's basically saying he was going to punch her next time. "He spit in my face, then he spit in my mouth, and he slapped me in my face again for the 4th time. He choked me during an argument. I had sex with him. I had oral sex with him. I became fed up with him and went home and confessed to my mother." Now, then we get into the pseudonym Jane. Again, we've been over this several times, right? She was 17 years old when he started to abuse her. Testified that her abuse, which caused her to forego attending her senior year of high school in person, left her with an incurable sexually transmitted disease and caused her to endure physical abuse almost every 2 to 3 days during the entire 4 years that she spent with him. Faith was 19 when she first met R. Kelly. She testified that he exposed her to genital herpes without her consent. He became increasingly controlling, forced her to give him oral sex, and after she broke one of his rules in LA, at his trial, right, many of the defendants, victims overcame immense fear, and they relived some of their worst experiences of their lives in the public courtroom in front of the man who abused them, and in some cases controlled every single aspect of their lives, from when they could go to the bathroom to when they could look and whenever they could leave a room or a bus. For months and even years, they lived under this. Now, R. Kelly likely believed that his very presence in the courtroom would intimidate and alter their testimony, but it didn't. After years of R. Kelly having committed crimes with impunity, using his fame, money, power, and network to intimidate, silence, threaten his victims, they were able to tell the jury and the court what they experienced in the veritable twilight zone that the defendant created and his inner circle sustained and helped protect. Many of those victims were subject to harassment and threats on social media or otherwise, both before and after the trial, from the defendant's supporters and loyal fan base. You may be aware that there were some instances where people were held accountable for attempting to intimidate, right, and tamper with the witnesses as it pertained to this trial. Obviously, R. Kelly's got like a lot of goons, right? People who want to intimidate and want to protect him for a check, to remain, their close proximity to him, whatever. But he did have several people, members of his team, who were trying to intimidate these, all of these 45 witnesses, or at least a couple of them, to not testify. But of course they did. Luckily they did. The testimony of such victims is all the more remarkable given the methods the defendant, R. Kelly, used to prevent his victims from coming forward in the first place. R. Kelly regularly required his victims to pen letters with embarrassing falsehoods. And we spoke about all of these things. Let's see. R. Kelly also entered into subtle agreements which prohibited the parties from ever speaking of the time they spent with him, and called for the entry of liquidated damages should they violate the provision. Indeed, his methods did work so well that some potential victim witnesses simply refused to meet with the government during the investigation, citing the extraordinary harm that would result from reliving that period of their lives and fearing the meeting with law enforcement would expose them to financial ruin. Those who did betray the defendant exposed themselves to the full scale of retaliatory tactics by R. Kelly and the network backing him. For example, Faith filed a civil lawsuit against R. Kelly. R. Kelly, along with one of his longtime business managers, Donald Russell, and Russell's mother, arranged for compromising photographs. Oh my God. That R. Kelly had taken of Faith to be sent to her civil lawyer in Brooklyn, New York, with a letter threatening, among other things, to release uncropped versions of the photographs publicly if she did not abandon her lawsuit and stop speaking publicly about R. Kelly. Faith did not withdraw her lawsuit, and therefore Russell sent threatening texts to Faith and her mother, including the same crop photographs with the ominous words, "Pull the plug or you will be exposed." and criminal charges to follow. And further created a Facebook page using an alias Dunn and Surviving Lies, where he ultimately followed through with those threats by publicly posting graphic photographs of Faith before Facebook took the photos down. The defendant also, R. Kelly, ensured the protection and the continuation of his enterprise and his ability to engage in criminal conduct by demanding absolute loyalty and sometimes using threats against others, including those in his inner circle. For example, as he testified at trial, when Demetrius Smith expressed doubt that his plan to marry 15-year-old Aaliyah would avoid exposure to the defendant's sexual abuse of Aaliyah, the defendant, R. Kelly, told him that he needed to pick a side. On another occasion, when R. Kelly faced another legal predicament involving another young female, he told Shell Mack that she needed to pick a team and that in these types of situations, people end up missing, which Mack clearly understood as a threat. In the months before his arrest, R. Kelly told another woman, who was Jane Doe number 19, that she needed to decide which team she was on, Team Kells or the other team, and that she had a beautiful family and that she didn't want to be handled, right? You know, when somebody's going to bring up your family and they're threatening you, trying to intimidate and manipulate you into doing something, and they bring up your family, that is definitely an indirect and arguably a direct threat. And this is something, again, it says right here, a comment that Jane Doe 19 construed as a threat, because it is. The seriousness of R. Kelly's crimes and the harm he caused is also laid bare in the sheer number of his victims and the 3 decades over which these crimes spanned. The indictment alleged charges related to 6 victims, and 12 victims testified at the trial regarding the abuse that R. Kelly committed. Finally, the pattern of crimes committed by R. Kelly demonstrates an escalation of the brazenness with which he engaged in illegal conduct. As made clear through Jane's extensive testimony at trial, R. Kelly used physical violence and psychological manipulation to ensure that she and his other purported girlfriends afforded the defendant the adoration he demanded, obeyed every rule be followed, and that they complied with all of his demands, including having sexual contact with numerous other male and female partners on his command. A letter recovered showed that R. Kelly would not allow one woman who was 26 years old to use a telephone to contact her father, that her father had actually brought her, and she was required to ask permission from him in order to contact her mother. In another note that was recovered by law enforcement, Jane recounted the defendant's instructions: trust daddy and do whatever he says, whenever he says, with no rebuttal, disrespect, or rebellion. A video recovered from R. Kelly's residence showed him violently spanking one of his victims, imposing severe pain and leaving the victim in tears, and then requiring her to walk back and forth naked and making humiliating and disparaging remarks about herself over and over and over again. In doing so, R. Kelly severely physically and psychologically scarred all of his victims repeatedly and constantly. A sentence in excess of 25 years is necessary to reflect the profound seriousness of the crimes committed by the defendant. Okay. Woo, child. This is a lot. This is a lot. I'm going to read one paragraph from his history and characteristics, because a lot of the stuff gets repetitive after a while. But just understand, like, when they are putting together all of these legal documents, they need to make sure that they give an access, like a plethora of information to make sure that this stuff sticks. They can't just send a 3-page motion and be like, give them 25 years. They have to be extra detailed, and some of the stuff does repeat itself, right? So when it gets into R. Kelly's history and characteristics, it says R. Kelly's history and characteristics also support a sentence in excess of 25 years. His crimes were not aberrational. They were his regular mode of operation, which he had no intention of ceasing. Over the course of years, numerous women and girls filed lawsuits against R. Kelly, alleging various forms of sexual exploitation by him, Even assuming the defendant did not understand the harm he was causing to these women and girls before they filed those lawsuits, he certainly knew at the time he agreed to pay them hundreds of thousands of dollars. But these financial consequences did nothing to even curb, let alone stop, his pattern of abuse. Nor did R. Kelly's 2002 arrest and eventual state trial in 2008 stop him from repeatedly committing these crimes. If anything, R. Kelly's acquittal after his state trial appears to have emboldened him with the belief that he was untouchable. And over the next decade, his crimes continued. Affording deterrence and protecting the public. I know I said I was just going to read one more, but let me read this too. Okay. Given the breadth of R. Kelly's conduct and its continuity over a period of decades, the government has little doubt that if afforded an opportunity to offend again, that he would do so. The instant offenses of R. Kelly's history demonstrate that he poses a serious danger to the public. His actions were brazen, manipulative, controlling, and coercive. He has shown no remorse or respect for the law. As set forth above, more than a decade ago, several women and girls retained legal representation to pursue damages against R. Kelly as a result of the harm caused to them. The harms raised in these matters included R. Kelly's having sexual contact with minors who were too young to consent. As a result of R. Kelly's wealth, he was able to resolve these matters without facing criminal charges and instead paid his victims to settle these cases. Notwithstanding this opportunity to reform his behavior a second, third, or fourth time, R. Kelly was not deterred and he continued to engage in criminal conduct. In fact, his conduct escalated. As noted above, he also previously faced criminal prosecution in Cook County, Illinois, for sexually exploiting a minor by producing a videotape of her engaging in explicit sexual conduct. Putting aside his guilt as to those charges, there could be no doubt that R. Kelly was then on notice as to the criminality of such behavior, its seriousness, the penalties he faced for engaging in such conduct. But again, that experience did not deter him from engaging in further criminal activity, including the very type of conduct with which he was then charged. As a result, the government respectfully submits the defendant is unlikely to be deterred from further sexually abusing and exploiting children to others, and the sentence should therefore incapacitate the defendant for a lengthy period of time to prevent him from further victimizing others. The sentence sought by the government would incapacitate the defendant until he reaches his 70s. Given the need for specific deterrence and incapacitation, the government respectfully submits that a shorter sentence would be insufficient to adequately protect the public. A significant sentence is also necessary for general deterrence. While the government doubts the defendant will be deterred, a lengthy sentence of imprisonment will serve to deter others, including those with wealth, fame, and outsized power, such as status, from engaging in similar crimes. This is particularly so given with the high-profile nature of the defendant and the likelihood that the length of his sentence will be widely publicized. In other words, this is what they're saying exactly right here at this part. They want to make an example out of R. Kelly. They know it's going to be publicized. They know that this is a high-profile case. They know that I got mentioned by the New York Times and I did my damn thing with covering it, right? Since there were no cameras allowed in the courtroom, but there was still a lot of information or a limited amount of information, right? If you were savvy enough to, find it and do videos and cover the trial, they're trying to make an example out of him so that other people with money who are tempted, who think about doing stuff like this, who think that they are invincible to justice and the law, that they won't be held accountable. They're hoping that not only will this protect the public, not only will this penalize R. Kelly and protect people from R. Kelly, but it's going to send a message to other people with wealth, money, notoriety, and even a position of authority, right? To not do this type of stuff. That's what they're getting at here. That is exactly what they're getting at here. Okay. Let's see. Let's see. Is there anything else? Avoiding unwarranted sentence disparities. A fine with the guidelines. It's not what's a fine? What y'all talking about with a fine? The government also asked the court to impose a fine. The guidelines provides that the court shall impose a fine in all cases except where the defendant establishes that he is unable to pay and not likely to become able to pay the fine. The defendant bears the burden of proving an inability to pay. In this case, R. Kelly cannot sustain this burden. The government respectfully submits the sentence in this case should include a fine within the advisory guideline range of $50,000 to $250,000. So I know R. Kelly say he broke, right? But he's still paying these high-profile attorneys. You know what I'm saying? Like, if he can afford an attorney that Bill Cosby had, and there was another person that Jennifer Bonjean represents as well. She is a high-profile attorney, and she represents a lot of guilty niggas. So they think that, listen, he might be crime broke. They saying he didn't even have enough money to pay for his transcript so that he could get right for the legal proceedings. But they think he's got $50,000 to $250,000 to $250,000. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. Let's see if there's anything else. See, I was going to stop reading. I'm glad I decided to keep reading just to make sure I understood correctly and to make sure I was providing y'all with all the information that y'all need to feel fulfilled as it pertains to R. Kelly's nasty act. Okay? I did y'all a huge service today. So I think I have earned my thumbs up from all of y'all that is sitting here on my bus. Okay? Conclusion. In this case, given all the facts and circumstances discussed above, a sentence in excess of 25 years is necessary to achieve the purposes set forth in this case and the law. That is the 31st page. I read y'all all 31 of these pages sitting right here. Listen, let me tell you about his attorney's response, though, right? Look at this. That R. Kelly sketch. It just doesn't get old because it damn sure don't look like this sketch art. They said this looked like Regret Kelly. They said this is Regret Kelly. This is not R. Kelly. Okay. Now that I can sit back and relax a little bit, Lord have mercy. That was a lot of reading. My voice box is stressed out. You know, some people, when they read transcripts and very lengthy motions and shit, they be having people up, you know, taking turns and reading and stuff. And me, like, I just want to get through it. I don't want to, like, depend on nobody else to be reading and messing up and taking forever. I just want to get through the shit. But I do want to tell you what R. Kelly. Oh, look, this really looked like Regret Kelly right here. What's this? How many different sketch artists did they have? Because these is 3 different people, baby. That one. Oh, Lord, this one. Sad Mickey Mouse child. This is a hot mess. This is an entire and absolute hot mess. But okay. Let's keep it pushing. Them sketches definitely kept me tickled while I was covering the trial, child. That was a saving grace. Okay. Let's get into what his attorney said, right? His attorney is Jennifer Bonjean, right? And she's argued that he should be sentenced to fewer than 14 years, right? The government is asking for 25 plus years. And they're literally like, listen, we want him to be in his 70s when he gets out. But again, this is just one of 3 cases. He's still got 2 more trials to face, right? So his attorney is saying that he should be sentenced to fewer than 14 years in prison. And she plans to explain why his history and characteristics justify the shorter sentence in a filing this coming Monday. So the day after tomorrow, she's supposed to be submitting the motion. Let's see how long it is. See, because the government got 31 pages as to why he's guilty. How many pages can she produce proving he's innocent or worthy of a lighter sentence? I doubt it's 31 pages. What you gonna say? I mean, dang, it'd be different if he could at least read and teach the kids something. He tutored the kids, helped them learn in school. R. Kelly was about dumb as a box of rocks. He was only musically inclined. I just don't understand what characteristics or traits you can, counter. You can refute and say, no, he's a good person for what is XYZ. Can somebody help me understand? Like, honestly, like even take, am I biased? I just hate pedophiles. I hate pedophiles, right? But if we were even going to be realistic for a second, can anybody in the chat right now, if you're on the bus, that means you're watching live. If you're chasing the bus, that means you're watching the replay. Can you help? What good factors could they possibly propose to get him a shorter sentence? They're talking about there's good stuff in his history and characteristics to help counter all of this guilt and all of this actual evidence as to how and the fact that he did all these things. I don't understand. She represented somebody in the Nexium. I knew this what it was. Okay, in the Nexium sex cult case. Oh, so she. Oh, oh my God. So she just represents a whole but I don't know how she sleep at night. She only like it's like her specialty is representing, and if you want to call it a specialty, right? Because some of these people still get found guilty. She represents people who are sexual deviants. Like I just don't understand. Somebody says she can produce 1 page, 2 paragraphs at best. I don't know how many pages or what characteristics or history do you think she's really going to be able to present to legitimately refute the stuff? Like what? Like just what is it? What is it? Someone says they can say, well, yeah, they can say he was molested by his sister, so he thought it was okay. I don't think that's going to work. I mean, I don't think that's going to work. I don't think that's, but you know, I wouldn't doubt that she would include that though, to try to victimize him a little bit, humanize him. You know, since all of the other of the 45 people who testified, or you know, he had a lot of victims, right? They're going to try and bust out their tiny violin to make him out to be a victim too. That could definitely be one. First up, let's see the good stuff they claim. Child, ain't no good stuff. What good stuff? What, they just gonna call him a good musician or something? I just don't get it. I just don't get it. They said she's probably an undercover child. I don't know. She better not use uneducation as the reason. She better not. They said all the maps are about to call her. Y'all know what maps are. Minor attracted people. They've coined the term and they're trying to add that onto the LGBT community, but that's a whole nother conversation for issues under the flag, which is something that I talk about over here. But nonetheless, listen, this was extensive. This was very extensive. Okay. And I wanted to bring y'all all this information. I know a lot of y'all, you know, my credibility, I know that y'all trust me, and especially as it pertains to R. Kelly and all of his nastiness. Okay. So when I came across this information, I'm like, let me go find the motion. And let me just aggregate all of the information that I can and let y'all know what's going on. Again, the sentencing is on the 29th, which is in 19 days. Okay. So we're going to see how that goes. They said he's going to testify himself. Child. Keller is cooked 400 pieces of evidence. Yeah, it was a lot. It was. They said they need to pray for Robert. See, you know what? I used to have all those clips of the Beehive loaded in, but you know, when I stopped covering the trial, I deleted them. But I know he in there.
Oh my God.
He gonna sit in that courtroom. He's just not gonna be able to get it together. He just not.
Oh my God.
He is going to be upset. But listen, what are your final thoughts? Do you have any unanswered questions as it pertains to this motion, the proposed 25 years that the government, the prosecution are trying to inflict upon and crack down on Robert Kelly with? What are your thoughts? I just think he's a sick freak, and I just think it's time. I'm just ready for his other 2 trials to come up as well, so that we can really understand how much time is he definitely going to be spending in jail. Is he going to be up for parole or probation as it pertains to the other cases? Like I was telling you earlier, Minnesota state prosecutors charged him with engaging in prostitution with a minor, and federal prosecutors in Illinois charged him for child pornography and obstruction. So he's got some other stuff that he's up against that he still needs to be sentenced for as well. The road is long from over when it pertains to R. Kelly and even the Beehive child, because you know they be swarming over here mad at me because I'm just presenting the facts. Like, listen, your king is nasty. Your king is nasty. You can't deny that Aaliyah wasn't a victim of his. You can't deny that some of the other women were victims of his. So it definitely became like a mudslinging contest as it pertained to R. Kelly, his defense at the time of the trial. Some of them left him, child, but they were basically calling the girls just hungry groupies, you know, provocative and promiscuous, and saying that the parents were enabling some of that stuff. And honestly, some of the parents were enabling some of that stuff, if we're going to be honest. However, that doesn't make it right. Your parent can't even give consent for you, even if they are doing some down low nasty stuff. They cannot give consent for you. So listen, any and all thoughts, I want to know what you all are thinking down below. Okay. Be sure to tag me in all of your favorite trending topics on Instagram and on Twitter. Thank you for watching. Thank you for checking out that community tab as well. I'm going to be back in a little bit just to relax because this was a lot to go through, and I'm just glad that I got it done with. Definitely more of a serious and a more of a formal of a format and a broadcast here. So I definitely just want to sit back and chill. It's Friday night, and I just want to get into some of these other trending topics. So make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the notification bell. I know y'all already hit thumbs up, unless you're trying to get off the bus and square up with me, because we can fight. We can fight if you haven't hit thumbs up. But listen, don't forget to do something relaxing for yourself today as well. Okay. Y'all know I'll be trying to go live every day, but I missed a couple of days this week because self-care took longer than I thought it would. And that's okay. That's why I have so much energy today, because I got 2 days of rest without going live. And it's not that I wanted to not go live, because I did want to go live, but my body was like, rest, my child, rest. So I had to listen to my body. And I have been taking self-care a lot more serious. I realized it's not a badge of honor to, brag or disclose the things that you've done when you've been neglecting yourself and depleting yourself. Like, it's not a badge of honor to always be on E, and I do like to work hard, and I do like to provide you all with quality content that is enlightening, informative, that can help you sit back and relax. Sometimes I do cover topics that just aren't positive, but it's stuff that's happening in the world as it pertains to breaking Black news and celebrity updates. So, and I have to make sure that sometimes when I cover heavy stuff, that I take some time. There was a mass shooting literally yesterday here in Maryland. Y'all know I'm here in Baltimore. I'm like, I can't cover it. I can't read it. It's too much for me. I internalize a lot of stuff when I cover things. And I think that shows through when I do cover anything, whether it be serious, funny, not, I internalize stuff. And when I covered that Uvalde thing, when all of those children died, right? That sat with me for a while. And I was like, whoa, I can't just be covering every mass shoot. I just can't. I can't, because it hurts. It hurts my soul. It hurts my feelings. And I imagine one of my close family members being there or something like that. So luckily I have the ability, because I'm not with the network yet. I have the ability to kind of, pick and choose how I want to balance out my content. And I don't mind moving away from the serious stuff, right? And I try to do a good balance, because sometimes we just need some escapism, right? Like, I don't want y'all, every time y'all come onto my channel and I'm only covering mass shootings, sad stuff. I want to laugh, right? So that's what the Black News Bus is all about. It's a really good balance of what's going on social media, what's going on in the world, what's going on with the celebrities, but also what's going on with everyday Black people like you and me, right? And also, y'all know I always got that Black history in there too. So those are some of the things that go on over here on my channel. Thank you so much, Amy Diaz, for being a channel member, #1. But also, thank you so much for the $19.99 super chat. I greatly appreciate it. Listen, make sure you do something to sit back and decompress today. Let me know on all the things that we discussed in this motion today. Do you think the punishment fits the crime as it pertains to R. Kelly potentially getting 25 or more years for just this one of 3 trials? You think it's fair for him to get out in his 70s for all the stuff that he did to all of these young girls, women, boys, men, whatever? Any and all thoughts, make sure you keep it sticky and real down below in the comments. And that's whether you are here on the bus with me right now or whether you're chasing the bus watching that replay. Okay. I hope y'all have good dinner. I'm gonna go munch on a couple of things. I promise I'm not gonna get the itis and not show back up. I'm not. I'm only gonna eat a couple of bites of food. Then we're gonna be back to talk about more uplifting things, right? But listen, y'all make sure to stay beautiful, Black, and blessed until the next video. If you have not already taken a moment to subscribe, take your goddamn time to subscribe, or thumbs up or down. Either way, I appreciate it. But be sure to hit that notification bell so that you don't miss out on any of this R. Kelly information as it becomes available to your girl, and other breaking Black news and celebrity information. Drop some of them pancake emojis down below, and I'm going to catch y'all in a little bit with a laid back broadcast. Happy Friday.
But that's it. If you want to catch more of my commentary on Black culture or vital and trending information, be sure to subscribe by hitting that little circle in the middle of the screen, or I'll catch you in one of these rectangles to the right in another video. I'll see you there.
You know what? I feel like it's only fair, right? Y'all remember when I used to cover the trial? We would always sit and laugh and joke, right, at this song that he did over in Ethiopia. It's only right. I'm feeling very nostalgic right now, right? And it wasn't even that long ago. But this song definitely always had us cracking up, for sure. He is so out of pocket for that.
Let's settle down for a second so I can talk to y'all for a second. I got a problem.
Oh no, let's get the clearer version. Hold on. This one not clear as I want it to be. Hold on. Pull up.
I got it.
Do you have your passports? Did you get your shots? Girl, would you like to come back with Rob to America? He is so out of pocket. America. Do you have your passport? Did you get your shots?
Girl,
He out of pocket.
come back with Rob.
America.
America. America. Do you have your
Passport.
Did you get your shots?
Who wanna come?
Back with us to
Why is he so out of pocket? See, everybody is putting their crimes in the songs nowadays and want to talk about, don't use the music against me because it's just art. It ain't just art. It ain't just art. You doing this stuff. And I got a story for y'all when we come back to a little later on after I take a bite to eat of another story of somebody admitting they mess in the song, from Young Thug to this person to that person. What's wrong with you? What's not clicking? You gotta be a crazy ass person to profess your crimes before or after you do it in music and then say, don't use that against me. No, I'm gonna use it against you. I'm absolutely gonna use it against you, you fool. Let me go eat some food and come back. I can't wait to chop it up with y'all. Eat y'all dinner. I'm gonna meet y'all back here. Bring y'all libations to the next situation. Go out to the liquor store, get what you need to get, roll up what you need to roll up. If you do any of that meth or any of that stuff like that, I don't want you here. You need to get yourself right first. If you doing that hardcore stuff, don't get on my bus with that shit. Don't get on. No. Okay. I'm gonna see y'all in a little bit. Bye.
But that's it. If you want to catch more of my commentary on Black culture or vital and trending information, be sure to subscribe by hitting that little circle in the middle of the screen, or I'll catch you in one of these rectangles to the right in another video. I'll see you there.